Everybody, welcome back to the Insiders Lounge. Today we have another episode and another special guest. Harry, thanks for coming on, and feel free to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Very, very happy to be on the show. So I'm Harry Varley, currently working for Gent, and my role is as the head of scouting in Africa for the club.
So we'll bring things all the way back to your childhood. You grew up in Leeds. Give a little introduction into what your childhood looked like. Were you growing up playing football? What were your first kind of footballing memories?
So I was born in Leeds and then grew up in Devon. So I spent the first couple of years in Leeds, and then we moved down to the south coast of England, which is not as big a hotbed for football, but there's still you have teams like Exeter and Plymouth and Torquay in that area. So I started around 7, 8 years old playing football, and played all the way through till around about 23. When I kind of moved. At that point, I'd been coaching for 4 or 5 years, and I started to really transition into the full-time coaching side of things.
And then you ended up sticking near around Leeds, or you went back to Leeds, I guess, after moving down south for university, and you had a degree in philosophy. Can you touch on kind of how that process of going through? I always like seeing if people felt like it was worth going to, and how you use your degree today, like in the philosophy background in coaching and what you're doing today.
So yeah, I went back up to Leeds partly because I wanted to kind of reconnect with that side of my background, and I really got that out of the time being back up there. I felt like I had really got in touch with my family's roots and my own roots. The course was not really, to your question, as beneficial as I thought it would be. Um, I'm more interested in Eastern philosophy, kind of Taoism, and the philosophy from kind of Asia, and there wasn't really any option to do that. And I think in general now the direction that philosophy has gone is much more towards logic and towards a more mathematical or science-based approach. And I don't have any interest in it, if I'm totally honest. So I think I had an amazing social life there. Leeds as a kind of student city, there's 30,000 students, so it's one of the best student environments. Leeds as a place is a great place to visit. Like especially people will come to England and tell me like, oh, I've visited England, but they've only been to London. I think you have to come to places like Leeds and Manchester and Newcastle if you really want to experience the culture. So yeah, I got a lot out of it kind of around the course, but maybe not so much from the actual studying part.
When I visited England, like you said, sorry, I really tried to try out the different areas. So I'm a big Liverpool fan, so we went to Liverpool for a
Okay,
day or
nice.
two. I did Manchester, London, and then we went. I guess we went from Manchester all the way up to Glasgow in Scotland. So we kind of
Oh,
stopped in a
perfect.
few places to see.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I think I've kind of gotten the only other place I would have done is the South Coast. We didn't really get a chance to go,
Yeah, well,
but that's
Bristol
probably
is a
the
good
next
city.
one.
Bristol
Mhm.
is a nice city. You would definitely enjoy that. And Wales, I mean, for me, the Welsh people are so warm and friendly. Like probably the best in the British Isles.
Wales, I missed out on. That was one of the places that I didn't get to
Yeah,
see.
they're
I went
great.
to Ireland, Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. Wales, we missed out. I think there's a stat where there's more sheep than people in Wales, or
Oh
something like
yeah, yeah, for
crazy like
sure,
that.
100%. Yeah.
So we'll get into some of your past positions now, things that you've kind of worked up to up until this point. So you've been a technical director, coach. You've worked in Africa. You've worked in parts of Europe. You want to just touch on some of the key positions that you were a part of, and some of the projects you worked on as well.
Yeah, so I would say as a person, maybe I'm kind of impatient, and I like to try lots of different things. So there has been kind of a convergence of my interests. I love traveling. I love kind of the options that you get from traveling and the experiences you get from traveling. And that's kind of led me to also be able to fast track my career in some ways. I felt I went back to the UK in 2014 to do my UFB license, and I was working for Shrewsbury Town at the time. So I was a lead foundation phase coach, and I could see the people around me how their kind of progression was going, and it just felt to me that it was going to take too long. I didn't think I was going to get the personal development or the professional development, and so at that point, I kind of jumped on a plane to Asia and said, I think I can do it quicker there. So yeah, it's kind of led me all over. I was with Right to Dream in Ghana before I had this role, so I was working with the younger age groups there. Previous to that, I was in the Caribbean working in women's football. In Grenada, I was the head of women's football, so covering everything, covering national teams, leagues, grassroots, schools football, everything. In the Cayman Islands, I was working with a private academy and then also the senior women's national team. Before that, where was I before that? Before that, I was in Uganda, Uganda and Rwanda. So I was technical director of an academy in Uganda. I was head coach of a team in Rwanda second division. And then prior to that, it was more kind of private coaching academies in Singapore, New Zealand, Mexico. And I would always say to people who are starting up, there is a lot of kind of perceived value to going straight into academies and clubs. But I think if you work in the kind of for-profit sector, you learn how to give value in the coaching that you do. I think it is a big benefit. I mean, my first full-time role was in America. I was full-time doing the soccer camps. And maybe the level of the players is not what or the highest level of players, but the challenges that you get day to day of trying to entertain and engage young kids for 6 hours a day for a whole week. I think it is the best grounding you can get in coaching. The amount of hours that you clock up in a summer in the States is equivalent to maybe 2-3 years that you would do back home.
And you mentioned the traveling aspect. So I'm curious how many countries you've been to so far, and what were the international experiences? How have they become a useful tool almost in a sense? I know we've spoken with a few different guests in the past, and we've spoken about how traveling can really open not only your footballing mindset, but also just learning different cultures and different people. I think becomes super valuable later on in certain careers. So how have all those many different international experiences around the world kind of helped you build up to where you are today?
100%. I agree with everything you're saying. So I think 56 or 57 countries
Wow.
on my last count is where I'm at the moment. And this new role is just increasing that like tenfold next year. I don't know, it'll probably be another 20, 25 countries to add to the list. So for me, it's really exciting. Maybe it's not giving me quite the same amount of time to really delve into the places. And I think that's been one of the reasons that I've loved kind of traveling and working, because it gives you both the time to really see the place that you're in, and also football has a real power and a value at kind of getting you into the community, and you meet people that maybe you would never meet if you're just there as a tourist or as a backpacker, or however you want to see it. And so I think from that side of things, the connection of kind of working and bringing some sort of skills and value to the community in exchange for getting to know the cultures and everything has been amazing. I think as a professional, learning how professionalism looks, how football looks in different cultures, has been really eye-opening. There are things that you think are kind of the same everywhere. They must be. And then you come to a new environment and you realize it's not like that. And it's a real test of character, a test of are you able to adapt? And really, I think early on, I was a little bit stuck in a kind of perception of how to do things. And I really believed that was the right thing to do, or that it had to be done like that. And it meant I was banging heads a lot of the time, and it took me. I'm quite a stubborn person, a long time to get my head around that nobody, whether they're doing a great job or doing not so great a job, wants to be told they're doing a bad job. And so you have to go in and build a relationship first, and then you can start to see what things can move, what things can't move. You start to understand why they are the way they are, and often it's not that people aren't aware of the challenges or the difficulties, but there will be cultural or there'll be systemic issues that are creating that challenge or situation. And so I would say, yeah, initially I made a lot of mistakes. If I look back on them now, I wouldn't be super proud or I wouldn't advise to do it the way I did it, but it was what it was. And now I think I'm much better at coming in with a little more patience, a little more humility, and just taking a little bit of time to see how things are and listen and understand what people are, how they're interacting with football, what their objective is with football. And I think it's maybe better with individual players as well. I think from those experiences that I had, I'm now better able to when I engage with a player, give them the time to speak, and then I can understand what they're trying to achieve in football. Maybe they want to be professional footballers. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's just something that they do for fun. And I can better. It's made me a better coach and made me a better person, I think.
You're speaking on the communication with players, and then you also mentioned traveling and actually living in these places, not just being a backpacker in a sense. How many languages have you picked up on any other languages? Have you been able to learn other languages, or is it just you're just learning and adapting to the culture?
Yeah, so Spanish, I can
Hmm.
speak a kind of passable Spanish now from my time in Mexico, and then it tends to be in the places that you travel to. You pick up kind of the day to day phrases. I wouldn't say that I'm particularly fluent in any of the other languages of the countries that I've been in, but while you're there, you kind of get by learning a few phrases, and it's another really good way to connect with the players. Like the players love to teach you the phrases, to teach you all the bad words and all of that. So it's another tool in your arsenal of how do you build relationship with players so that you can help them to improve performance.
Because we've spoken before in the football industry, I feel like especially language is so important because it's such a global game and it's really
Yeah.
important. And I think there's two sides to it. One is knowing the culture, which I think you've been able to really adapt to and understanding people's backgrounds, and then also the language part. And I think once you can combine those two, you really get a full understanding of a certain country or region.
Look, and I think there's just an element of whether your intention is to fully learn the language, just making the effort is something that builds a bridge, and it's going to get you massive buy-in, and it's going to create opportunities or the people that you're working with, the players that you're working with, whoever, they're going to be much more open to introducing you to parts of their life and their world you would never see if they think that you genuinely have some interest in being there and meeting them on that level. So I would say to anybody who is going to go and work abroad, probably you won't have to, you will be mostly speaking in the language, your native language. But it makes a real big difference if you just try to meet people halfway and learn phrases and really just give time to the people that you're working with. It's an amazing experience. And sometimes what you're dealing with on the professional side might not be what you're used to and might not have the same kind of professional standards, but the amazing life experience that you're going to get on top of it, for me, massively outweighs any of those kind of challenges or downfalls on the other side.
We'll get into what you're doing now, your current project. How did you first get introduced to Ghent, and how did the idea kind of come up to be this first African scout that is not just scouting Africa, but you're truly living the experience and living there full time?
So when I was in Uganda in 2016, um, Samuel Cardenas reached out to me on LinkedIn, and so we kind of built a relationship from that time. He was very interested in the project that we were doing and really interested in what Africa looks like on the ground and what is the pathway to kind of working within Africa and building pathways to get out of it. And so we kind of just kept our relationship going over time. Then I went to Right to Dream, and while I was at Right to Dream, Samuel had recruited Gift Orban to
Hmm.
Ghent. And Gift is a very interesting story because he's a guy that was playing third division in Togo, fourth division in Nigeria, He wasn't on anybody's radar. And then he turned up at a showcase, and he showed the world what he could do. And it led the club to really think about whether they were investing as much time and effort in African
Mm.
recruitment as they could be. And look, Ghent is a club with a rich history of African players, and I think they are one of the better clubs in Europe for integrating African players. There is a community that helps players to be successful in their adaptation, but there's always room for improvement. And it's something that I talk to Samuel about a lot of the time, that if you're just going to try and video scout Africa, good luck, like
Mm.
almost impossible. And if you think that African football is like anywhere else in the world, where the best players are in the Premier Leagues, in the top leagues, it doesn't work like that. There are a multitude of factors that affect African football that mean even if you go to the regional leagues, you might find somebody who has the potential to go and play in Europe. And it can be confounding and confusing and frustrating at times. But the reality is, the next wave of recruitment internationally is going to be in this continent. The saturation in all the other markets is at breaking point, but there's still incredible untapped potential in a continent that has huge population sizes, are mad for football, and they're just desperate for the right sort of infrastructure to be able to exploit that talent, or to give the platform to that talent. So Samuel brought me in August. I've been in a role, I guess, now for 4 or 5 months, and that's really the objective: is to start going to the places where no one else has been going, and can we really look to be at the front of the wave? Can we be the ones that take the first steps into to changing the way that recruitment is done, and bringing these opportunities to the players that deserve them?
When I first discovered your story, it was through LinkedIn. You always have these posts, or either like frequently asked questions, or just misconceptions that people have about African football. And because you're on the ground, you're really, I think you were saying in the one post that you're the only known like full-time scout in Africa from a European club. Is that what you said?
Yeah, and to my knowledge, a couple of people wrote to me, so
Mhm.
maybe there's one or two others, but yeah, essentially, there's a very few of us who are doing it here.
But in these questions, you're explaining, yeah, like I said, you're explaining these misconceptions that people have about the continent, about the football there, and because you're on the ground, you're actually able to answer these from with experience. And in the last few months, you've been able to learn, I'm sure, so much compared to what you knew beforehand.
Yeah,
Um,
look, and the posts are kind of they're two way, because I think there is just a problem on both sides. I
hmm,
think, as I've said, I mean, the last 5 months I've been going to showcase after showcase, and there is a lot of misunderstanding by the guys on the ground here in Africa about what they're supposed to be doing with the
hmm.
showcases, and they're just not really doing a good job of preparing the players and preparing the scouts come. And so, yes, I'm trying to give a little bit of maybe pre-warning, or just setting the groundwork for people who are looking to come to Africa, or to see how the landscape is. But there are also a lot of people involved in African football on LinkedIn and on these other platforms that want to know how to do it better.
Hmm.
Because the more we can get those aligned, the two parties, the more likely the players are going to get their chance to go out.
So during your time there, can you talk on some of the key points that you've learned so far, and some areas, like you said, it's two-parted really. I think it's people that are uneducated about Africa, and then in Africa, they're really starting to build this this infrastructure for football as the kind of two parts are slowly coming together. What are some of the areas of like improvement that you can see on the African front where you can really see them change the way they're doing things, but then also from an outsider's point of view, what are some of the new things that you've learned that you didn't really know before? Like you've had time in Africa, but now you've really got to experience the African footballing side of things.
Look, I would say it's been a really interesting journey, because I started in East Africa, and we really struggled to get the outside world to invest in the idea that there is talented footballers in East Africa.
Mhm.
Some of the conversations that we had with clubs in Europe, basically centered around the fact that they just didn't believe that footballers came from that region. And it was incredibly frustrating, and not helped by the football infrastructure there. The way that the football federations do their things, the age cheating, the focus on playing very old players in the leagues, not really any interest in football as a business, to be honest. Um, so that very petty, very trivial matters could stop players going out. Sometimes it can just be petulance. I mean, for example, a big issue in Uganda, I'll speak about specifically, but I'm aware that it happens in many places, is that a lot of the players are having to pay their coach to be in a team. And it's how coaches pay their bills, survive. And it's something that obviously I find to be not, well, pretty reprehensible, to be honest.
Mhm.
But that is the football landscape. And so you have to understand that if players are not willing to participate in that, then they don't get their opportunity. So whether they're talented or not, they won't get their chance. And so coming to West Africa, for me, there's very little difference in talent. People are still very skeptical when I say that, and I still kind of bang my head against the wall with this conversation. But honestly, I don't see any difference. And if you look at the population size in East Africa, they're huge. I mean, it's not
Mhm.
rocket science. Like, you are going to get talented players from countries that have huge populations and lots of talent. But the big difference in West Africa is that there is much more of a focus on football as a business. And there's still challenges with that, and it's still growing. But the countries that I have been visiting, the clubs are in their own way trying to get the players on. And it tends to be more on the overhyping players, and some of the techniques that probably, if they just did the work on the ground, it would be more beneficial and it would be more successful in getting more players out. But that is big, the biggest difference, and the biggest reason why you will see many more West African players going out compared to East Africa. Um, but at the same time, it's encouraging to see that when you get that kind of landscape and that environment, things can move. And at times when I was in Uganda and in Rwanda and Kenya, you feel like it's just the biggest mountain in the world and you can't get over it. It just feels like there's so many obstacles to getting players out that it's easy to get overwhelmed. It's easy to just think this is not possible. So it's been refreshing for me to come to the other side of the continent and see a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Say yes, it's also hard in West Africa. There's also lots of challenges, but the right people are pushing in the right direction, and I think you will see in the next 5 to 10 years that will just keep moving forward. And I don't think people understand how untapped the market is. I think people see quite a lot of African players outside, but I don't think they understand that if clubs and academies here actually did their work properly, the numbers would just explode.
Hmm. We've spoken about your role as a head scout in Africa, but what does that actually mean? What is the day in the life? I know I say typical day in the life, but I'm sure that's not even a thing because you're constantly doing something different. But in as an overview, what does a typical day in the life of Harry in Africa look like?
So it's kind of a dual role, and part of it is to oversee the team of intern analysts. So we get lots of videos sent from around the continent. The team will go through the videos and then send through the players that they think have potential. So part of the role is just working with them to improve their ability to kind of pick out those players, because it's much more difficult than watching kind of academy games or club games in Europe, where the camera footage is great, the fields are great, the team structure is understandable. A lot of the footage that we're dealing with can be quite incomprehensible to begin with if you're not used to the way that African football functions. So yeah, that is quite a big part of the role is watching the videos myself, but also just working with the guys to just improve the strategy that they have for picking out what's important. And I think over the last couple of months, we've really started to get there with that. And they've really got to a stage where they're making good assessments, and I'm not having to check back and verify so much. So that one is kind of dependent on when I'm online, and that is a big struggle. For me to
Mm.
do the job properly, sometimes I have to go out into the bush for a couple of days and no running water, no internet. So I'd say that's probably the hardest part of the job for me is trying to be online and responsive if they need an assessment on a player or to work with the guys. And then the other half is really, again, it's kind of two part. The first part is just identifying players. Is going and players that we've identified from the videos. Is going to see them live to verify what they look like in a live environment. Or going to showcase games, going to visit clubs, doing all of that kind of just live scouting process. And then the second part of it is doing a more general assessment of each individual country to see where they're at and to see for a club like Gent, who are a big club but not one of the biggest clubs, where is it that we think there is ample talent, but that we can have a competitive advantage by being there first. So the objective is over the next 12 to 18 months that I visit every country in Africa, write a report, and then we identify the countries that we think are tick all of those boxes, are the ones that we can have a close partnership with the club or with the football federation and really start to get on the ground and give support so that we can have a kind of long-term successful partnership.
I'm a big fan of data scouting, and we've had many guys on before that either work in data scouting, or we've had like Player Maker, which is a data scouting company in a sense. What does the data scouting world look like in Africa? Is it a thing? Do certain leagues use it, or is it really not used at all? Like, I would love to hear kind of data scouting and where it's at in Africa.
Absolutely zero. Yeah,
Hmm.
there's no data scouting. Most of the time, you're lucky if you can get a team sheet, a team lineup, let alone any sort of statistics. Um, yeah, again, it will come, and I would say probably North Africa is the most likely to be doing that quicker than everyone else. But the rest of the continent will get there in time. Uh, but for the time being, it's really you have to be on the ground. Like
Hmm.
it's either you're on the ground or what tends to be the case is that the players are highlighted from AFCON or regional under 17, under 20, full senior level competitions, which is a fairly good way to go about it. Um, Apart from there are again multiple challenges with that, because the selection process for players can be less than objective, let's say. So you'll get a bunch of talented players on the team a lot of the time, but maybe you won't see all of the players or the best players. So if you really, really want to get into it, and like for example, I'm in Gambia right now, they haven't been able to field a U17 team for quite a while. So you're missing out. If your objective and Ghent as a club are trying to get me to find the best 18-year-olds on the continent, well, I'm missing them. If I'm waiting for Gambia
Hmm.
to put an under 17 team out and they never do it, then I'm not going to see the players in time.
Yeah, I think it's one of the key things that in Europe and North America, I know that market especially, data scouting has become a thing where you start with data scouting, you see the profiles that interest you, and then you work into video scouting. So I'm sure the struggle of getting a video from a team or a game must be unreal, because you might not know the level or who's actually playing. Like you're saying, even a team sheet is sometimes a struggle.
100%. And video is the biggest struggle. There are
Mm.
so many teams and even countries where they aren't recording the games, and their resources are just enough to get the team to participate in the league, and cover costs. So adding an additional camera and a camera operator is just not in their budget. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, because of the way that FIFA do their funding and the lack of accountability that they put on the federations get away with not providing that either, which I think is probably, I would say, maybe not the biggest struggle or obstacle here, but I think it's the biggest one that can be easily solved very quickly if the federations use the FIFA funding in the correct way. It would not be difficult to record the games. It wouldn't be difficult at all, and that would make such a big difference to getting the exposure that the players need. I mean, even now, I have players that I work with in Uganda, and it's impossible for me to get video footage of them. And I know they're talented players, but a club like mine, many of the other clubs in Europe, without video, won't take a play. It's just not part of the process.
We've spoken about some of the challenges that you face in your day to day now, but looking at your whole career and just personal life in general, I say the football industry especially it's a constant roller coaster of highs and lows. Like one minute you're feeling good, everything's working out, and the next everything falls apart. What are some of the biggest challenges you've had across your entire career and personal life that you've been able to break through and that help you now in your day to day? You after breaking through that challenge, you've been able to work at a new level.
So I'd say I kind of covered it earlier.
Mhm.
Initially, it was a little bit about my perception of what being a professional was, um, and I was way too fixed, and I was way too stubborn in the way that I approach things. And I'm not perfect now. Most people would still say I'm quite stubborn, but I'm much better at understanding how the process works and meeting people on the ground and finding out what's valuable to the people that I'm working with first, and then trying to match our objectives together later on down the line. But that was definitely, I would say, in Mexico, which was the first country that I've worked in where I didn't speak the language. That was a real challenge for me at the beginning. And I didn't build good relationships because of that. And so I made my life very, very hard for a period of time. Um, so I think I would advise anybody who is, well, whether you're coaching abroad or coaching at home, football is all relationships. It's all relationships. And you might not agree with people, you might have your own idea of what the right way to do things is, but it's about finding a way, it's finding solutions. And this is what I talk to players about all the time, man, is if you get too stuck in your head about what should be the case, you'll never get anywhere. Look at what is the case and find a way to solve the issue and find a way to get through it. That will always be relationship based. Because even if there is a staff member that you don't really see eye to eye with, at some point down the line, you will need to rely on them. Yeah,
Mhm.
at some point, they will be the answer to a problem that you have. And if you haven't done anything to build a working relationship or more importantly, a personal relationship with, it's gonna not allow you to do your job properly. And I think that probably the biggest professional development. I think off the field, in terms of challenges, I would say I'm not. I'm not. Well, it's somebody that is a lot of interest. Like I do photography. I studied philosophy. I'm into films, art house, foreign language films. All the way when I was growing up playing football, that was a challenge for me being in the football environment. It was not very normal to have those interests, especially in the UK. Um, so I think it was always something that was at the back of my mind about how I could be authentic as myself and be in this industry. And I would say up until probably 3 years ago, when I did a boot camp, a workshop with Drew Broughton, I'd seen some of his content on LinkedIn, um, and he talked a lot about fear and courage. And the post that he was making really stood out to me as having something a little bit different than everything else I was seeing in the football industry. And
Mhm.
that workshop was really kind of revelatory to me. and made it clear to me that if you're not yourself, if you're not real, and you don't have the courage to be that, you can never have the impact on your players that you want. If you come in as a fake person every day, or you're pretending to be something, they will never trust you, and you will never get them to give 100% of themselves. And I would say I am so much happier with myself as a coach now because of that. Even if it's uncomfortable for me sometimes to put myself in a vulnerable situation and be in an environment where it's probably not normal to be so open to all these other things. But by doing it, you get much more connection with the players, and you can really get them to trust you and get that extra little special ingredient out of them at the same time.
You were giving some advice on relationships there, and some of the learnings you've had throughout your own life. If there's someone watching or listening who looks at your profile, looks what you're doing now, and thinks that's a unique, it really is, it's a unique career choice and a unique path that you've taken, but they might want to follow, or even just in the scouting realm in general, they want to work in scouting. I get this question a lot about how do I get into the industry, how do I start scouting, and I try and give my best advice, but I'm sure you, with the experience you have now, what advice do you have for those listeners?
Well, I think the scouting world is such a kind of diverse one. Like you said, you can go into the data analytics side, you can go into the kind of video analyst side, or I mean, I would say honestly, the role that I have, I didn't think it existed in me. I thought we were at a stage where it was almost impossible to be a live scout. And in some ways,
Mm,
I'm very grateful that Africa is the way that it is. African football is the way it is because it gives me the opportunity to do it. Um,
mm,
so I would say, firstly, you have to have a clear idea about what it is that you like doing. Do you like the data side of it? Do you like being there, watching the games live? Once you have that, I think it's the same as anything else. Expect to do a lot of work and not get paid anything. That's always the first point of entry. If you're happy to do that, then you've got your foot in the door. And then it's relationships. I really like LinkedIn. I mean, some people have different opinions about it, but I think it's been an invaluable tool for me. And I don't even think I'm particularly good at using it. I've met people who are much, much better at it, and they're much more open and they reach out to more people. But if you are clear about where you want to go, what the level of the club is, what it is exactly that you want from the role, go and find people who are going to give you that opportunity and reach out to them and prepare something. Make sure that you have something of value to them, offer it, and I'm convinced that if you take that approach, you will eventually find the outcome that you want. I've seen it multiple times. A lot of people aren't willing to take the first step. I think there's too much these days of people expecting everything to come to them, expecting that they can pay a subscription fee to a football CV website and that the job will just be seen. But as
mm.
far as I'm aware, most of the jobs that I have haven't been advertised. They're very, very rarely advertised. It's relationship based, and again, it's a good and a bad thing. Sometimes that can be nepotism, and it can be really exclusive. But as we said earlier, that's the game, and the game is to win. So if you want to be a winner and you want to get the job that you love, that you want to do, the answer is go and build relationships. Go and volunteer your time. Be somebody that person will trust and will give you the opportunity.
I think the two key points there that I've really started researching recently is Mads, actually, one of the directors with Right to Dream. He recently said
Okay,
on
yeah,
the podcast, "Do everything, expect nothing." So do as much
exactly.
as you can for people and expect nothing in return. But as you do that more and more, the more actually will come in return. And then I think the networking side is so important. Every single person you meet, you never know how that person is going to come back into your life at some point. And so I think leaving a good impression and having that mentality of do everything, help them as much as they can, because you never know how it's going to come back and benefit you potentially one day.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's for coaches, scouts, analysts, and players. Like those two things, and nothing is guaranteed. In the end, there is
Hmm.
no one answer, but I don't know any better approach than taking those two things. Push as hard as you can. Be a be a person that people are keen to speak to. That you've got something to speak about, and then you have a good chance.
We've spoken about your past. We've spoken about what you're currently working on. Let's speak on the future now. We're almost into 2024. Do you have some personal goals that you're looking to achieve in 2024? Are you a goal setter like that? And then the next question is also kind of similar in a sense.
I kind of go up and down with goal setting. I'm hyper competitive, and sometimes I feel like the goal setting can kind of derail me a little bit
Mm.
from just experiencing and enjoying what's in front of you. And I guess that links back to, as I said, I'm enthusiast for Taoist philosophy, and I talk a lot about being in the moment and following the way. And I know that when I'm happiest and I'm in balance most is when I'm not so fixated on kind of artificial targets. Um, so yeah, I kind of flip flop between the two. I would say at this point, the schedule I have for 24 is crazy. There's so many trips lined up already that I'm just gonna take a couple of weeks in Ghana to rest, reset, and then just see what happens throughout the year.
And we spoke a little bit earlier. You were speaking how your plan that you're currently working on now is the next 12 to 18 months. Let's say we sit down and we have this interview again in 10 years' time. Where do you think you'll be in terms of your career and your personal life and kind of everything that you're involved in?
Look, it comes back to the stubbornness thing. The
Mm,
program that I worked on in Uganda was on a personal, professional level the best I've ever worked with. Like being in that environment, working with those kids, and having that impact day to day was incredibly rewarding. And for me, it was a real disappointment that we were not able to see the program through to fruition. So I'm going to keep beating the drum, and I'm going to keep driving people crazy by telling them that you can do the same thing that's happening in West Africa, you can do it in East Africa. So yeah, my belief is that if we're talking again in 10 to 12 years, I will have a full-time residential program in East Africa, and hopefully we will be close to the first crop of players coming out and showing the world what can really be done out there.
Dominic, one of the previous guests we had, he said impossible is nothing, and I think that's a good quote for what you're talking about there.
Exactly.
We'll get into some of the quick fire questions here to end the episode off. So you grew up in Leeds. Were you a Leeds fan growing up, or did you support another club when you were young?
Huge Leeds fan, yeah. Especially back in the time when we were doing well in the Champions League, and we had Mark Viduka, Alan Smith, Rio Ferdinand, all these guys. It was it was exciting times, and then it's been a bit rough since then.
Yeah, we. I always ask this question because I find it fascinating. As people grow and work more in the football industry, you tend to have that sort of childhood club ripped apart from you a little bit, and your focus kind of changes, and you just enjoy football as a whole. Has that been the case for you as well, where you've kind of gone away from that Leeds full supporting like mentality, and you've kind of just enjoy the football environment?
Yeah, once you're in the world of professional football, the romance goes very, very quickly. So I would say, yeah, I kind of I have a kind of how would I say? I watch football. I try to enjoy it, and I would say,
Mm,
in general, actually, just the direction. And you see what happened with the court ruling on the Super League today. I mean,
mm.
there's only one direction that it's going, and it's taking it away from the people. It's taking it away from everything that makes it the global game. So I think it's quite hard to have the love. I think even as a child now, like it's not the same game that it was 20, 30 years ago, let alone 50, 100 years ago. So, I mean, I still follow Leeds, and when Bielsa was there, that kind of brought a little bit of the magic back. He
Yeah.
really captured the hearts and minds of Leeds and the people there. Uh, but yeah, it's not the same at all, really, especially when you know what goes on behind closed doors at clubs.
Do you have a favorite quote or saying that you live by?
Except the mystery.
I like that. That's a good one. And we have top. I know one of my goals is to travel to Africa. I really want to get into. If I can get near 56 countries, I'll be more than happy in my life. What are some top recommendations for some of the countries you've been to so far? Whether it's foods that you have to try or just places you have to see.
So I'd say if you want the most Africa experience, then Kinshasa is a city. Kinshasa has everything. It has the fashion, the style, the energy, the food. I was eating insects there, all sorts of craziness. It's the most intense city that I've ever been to in my life. Football crazy, yeah. So if you're talking about you want the real experience, maybe if you want a slightly easier lead in, if it's your first time, then cities like Accra and Dakar and Kigali in Rwanda, they're very modern cities. They're a little bit easier to navigate, and they have lots going on for them, lots of street food, and easy to see the culture. I think it's been interesting for me, having said, uh, been in East Africa, like I said, where, well, especially in Uganda and Rwanda, you don't really get to see the beaches and everything. This time around, Sierra Leone has incredible beaches. Yeah, it blew me away. Honestly, I wasn't that aware of that side of the country before I traveled there, but they have beaches that are equivalent to what I was experiencing in the Caribbean, and the same
Hmm.
here in Gambia. So, yeah, there are so many different things to experience. Obviously, if you go to Kenya and Rwanda and Uganda, you can do safari, you can see gorillas, you can see lions. It's it's a continent with so much, honestly, and I know there is some conservatism around people coming here, and worries about safety and other things, and they're legitimate to an extent. But honestly, if you love travel, then Africa is a continent you have to come to. You'll get so much back.
Are you a big reader? Do you like reading books? And if so, what are some top recommendations for the listeners?
So more audiobooks now, just because
Okay.
of my schedule and my time. I used to read a lot, but yeah, mostly audio books now. Um, and again, we talked about I'm kind of on the philosophy side, so
Mhm.
my top books are kind of like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and books that have a very philosophical bent. That's the sort of things that I tend to spend my time reading.
Do you have favorite hobbies outside of football that to just sometimes you just need a break and a mental relapse to just get away from it? Do you have something that's whether it's going to the beach or doing something now that you're in a new environment? Is there something to just break that?
So photography was that, but
Hmm.
again, because I'm a bit of an obsessive person, I started to go back into like a different form of work. So I'm really trying to find a balance about how I just do photography in a kind of fun way, and I like the fact that it allows me to meet people from different worlds, and musicians and artists and creative people, and so that's a real creative release. I get so much enjoyment, and I love the opportunities to work with people like that. Other than that, I mean, I get to travel all the time, so
Hmm.
the work is so much in line with what I would want to be doing anyway. I get to try new foods, I get to see new places. That um, yeah, I don't need too much of a break. Honestly, it doesn't really feel like that.
If you could sit down with one person, dead or alive, for a meal, who would it be and why?
I was thinking about this one. I would probably say Hunter S. Thompson. Like, I've always kind of been interested in the travel journalism, and his style particularly is something that with my photography I want to really get deeper into, and I feel people keep telling me I need to write a book about what I'm doing, and I feel like the style with which he wrote is something that I would definitely like to kind of incorporate into the way that I describe some of the mad experiences that I've been having over the last few years.
For those who don't know, can you just describe his background quickly so that they can understand?
So he's a gonzo journalist. So he wrote Fear and Loathing in
Hmm.
Las Vegas, and Run Diary, and he used to embed himself in cultures. He was with the Hells Angels for a period of time.
Oh wow.
His gonzo journalism was very drug fueled and very kind of psychedelic, and yeah, it's a very evocative style of writing, and yeah, I find there is an element to the day to day here that's so kind of abstract and chaotic at times that I don't know how else you would be able to write about it or represent it. You would need to find a style that has that same kind of energy. And I would always try to describe when I was in Uganda to my friends about just the day to day experience of being with people that don't really. You can ask somebody the same question twice and you'll get a different answer. And that is
Mm.
just very common here, that the facts are not particularly important. And it took me a long time to get my head on that. And it was, I never thought I would, to be honest. But after a while, you kind of just get into the rhythm of it. And that's it. Like in the West, we really focused on this is this and this is that. And here, it's not that important. So just get on with it.
No, it's been a brilliant time. I appreciate your time today to be on the podcast. Is there any last words you have? Anything you want to shout out? If people want to reach out to you, feel free to do so, and then we'll wrap things up.
Yeah, so I'm mostly on LinkedIn, so they can look me up. I'm Harry Varley on LinkedIn. My Instagram page is my photography page, so that is the Restless Collective, the underscore Restless underscore Collective. So check that out. That's not football related at all. You won't see, I don't think, any football photos in there, but that's the other side of my character. Other than that, it's been a real pleasure. I love chatting about football, and it's very grateful for the chance to speak about it.
Thanks again for coming on, and hopefully I'll be able to see you in Africa at some point.
Yeah, man, get yourself over.
All right, have a good one.
Cheers, boss.
Wanna hear you go.